Our next panel, we have decarbonization strategies from science to practice, and we'll have a special guest from France following with this French morning, Matthieu Auzanneau, the Executive Director of the SHIFT project, which will be joined by Dr. Faye Gerard, Energy Transition Director of the IOGP, International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, Matt McDaniel, Engineering Project Manager for Carbon Direct, and the panel will be moderated by Kerry King, Assistant Director here at the UT Energy Institute. And again, I would like to thank UT and the Energy Institute and his team for welcoming us this morning. And it's all about science and about collaboration and cooperation. So I'm working with Expertise France, which is the international cooperation agency for France, and solutions for energy, for climate are based on international cooperations and sharing. And so thanks again. Brian, okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So thank you all for joining us here. So we have a kind of short time frame here, so I'm just going to kind of jump right into it. We got a little bit logistic details. I'm going to start sharing my screen here for our remote presenter from France. So we have Matthieu Auzanneau from the SHIFT project, and he is going to tell us how they think about moving forward in decarbonization and the role of energy in France. And Matthieu, do you hear me?
I do.
Okay, well, we hear you in the room, and go ahead and see if you can go for 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, and then we'll move to the other panelists. Okay?
Right, thanks. Thank you very much. Bonjour à tous. So my name is Matthieu Auzanneau. I run the SHIFT project, which is a fairly influential think tank in France. Our aim is to launch coherent conversations on the energy transition. So the question is, how can we concretely achieve this historic feat of doing without fossil fuels within one generation only? Our approach is to look at the economy as just another physical phenomenon. In short, we believe that the problem posed, the tragedy that we have to avoid, is first and foremost a physical problem, then a technical one, and then only an economic problem. To put it plainly, where the conversation is almost always posed in terms of dollars or euros, at the SHIFT project, we believe it's essential to start with objective physical quantities, and money is not one of those. That is to say, joules, or watts, if you prefer, tons of stuff, and last but not least, people. Second slide, please. Yes, thanks. What we are facing, we believe, at the SHIFT project is what we call a double carbon constraint. It means we have not just one, but two excellent and cumulative reasons to be deadly serious about our collective commitment to moving away from fossil fuels. The first is downstream of from our technical systems. It's global warming, obviously. The second reason lays upstream. Unfortunately, it is much less talked about, yet it's much simpler to understand. It lays in the drying up of a number of major hydrocarbon sources on which today, for instance, Europe heavily depends upon in the North Sea, in all Africa, and tomorrow probably, that's the third slide, in Russia, which is today one of the major producers on the verge, probably on the verge of decline. Our century, which is supposed to be the century of the exit from oil, began with a war, probably motivated by the control of oil in Iraq in 2003. The Bush administration, I believe, and Dick Cheney in particular, were all too aware at the time of the deadly consequences for the sustainability of the American economic power, of the inexorable decline in conventional oil production, which started in the US in the year 1970. Suffice to say that at the time, a member of the Nixon cabinet remarked, in view of the unprecedented unexpected decline in Texas crude extraction, Popeye, you remember Popeye the Sailor Man? Popeye is running out of cheap spinach. Popeye is running out of cheap spinach. before he came upon shale or cheap spinach all around the Persian Gulf. The Iranian and chemical bombings in 91, the embargo on Iraq, and the final catastrophe of the invasion of Iraq in 2003 are some of the many scars left behind by Popeye's nightmarish quest for cheap spinach. Our main conclusion today at the SHIP project, which has a significant impact on the way the problem is now being considered in France, in particular by the General Secretariat for Ecological Planning, recently created under the aegis of the Prime Minister's services in Paris. We won't get out of this mess. We won't protect ourselves against the historic tragedy that is global warming, and that is the decline of mature oil resources with the business as usual tools of conventional economics. That's all. Thank you very much for letting me do this short introduction. Okay, not too long, I hope.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to the audience that my computer's on automatic slideshows. That's why I was going back and forth, because I couldn't get to stop here in 1 minute and figure it out. So thank you very much. In case anybody he's comparing oil to spinach, and we're out of cheap spinach. And this is how France thinks about their part of their energy dilemma and in the face of going to climate change. So now we're going to shift away from the online presentation here from Matthieu and go to presentations here in the room. We're going to go next to Dr. Faye Girard. She joined the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers in November 2023, so she's currently in that role as Director of the Energy Transition Directorate, and she is seconded from BP, and she's based in Houston's offices, and she's had 32 years experience in the oil and gas industry, has a PhD and a doctorate in business administration, an MBA, and a chemical engineering degree from Tuskegee University. So, Dr. Faye Girard, thank you.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Can everyone hear me okay? I didn't want to be yelling at you. So I'm going to drive my slides from here, if I may. So I'm excited to be here. Energy transition is a topic that I enjoy speaking about, researching, spending time on. It is important for our world. It's not individual, it is collective. So thank you for the introduction. I am Faye Girard. I am currently at the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers. I'm seconded into IOGP acronyms, so you'll hear a whole bunch of acronym soup with me. So if there's an acronym that I say, I advise you to call me out if you don't know it, and I try to keep myself attuned to that. But I'm seconded into IOGP from BP. What is IOGP? IOGP has been around for 50 years. It's 50 years of collaboration. Collaboration is key in this area, this topic. We have specific technical knowledge. We have 90 members associated with IOGP. Out of that 90 members, we have 2,500 experts, because we have deep expertise in multiple areas, including energy transition, safety, environmental, engineering, and the sort. We are a global voice for the industry. We speak on various topics. We publish 100 documents a year, publications a year, in collaboration with others, some internal to IOGP, and there's some collaborative with other associations. So let's talk about initiatives. What are some of the initiatives that we're working on? There's one called Life-Saving Rules. That's a safety initiative. We have some digital transformation, carbon capture and storage, CCS, methane reduction, and energy efficiency, or just to name some. I like to talk about what clients, what members, what constituents want from IOGP. It's around the regulatory and technological landscape of the energy transition. That's been a focal of what people keep asking about. What questions they're asking about, what are the strategies, what are the adoptions, what can we do regarding CCS? That's a big topic that's coming up. So I want to just kind of share with you how energy transition can look, right? So you'll see a mirage of our global members. We have it from in the Americas, we have them from Europe, we have them from the Middle East and Africa, and we also have them from Asia Pacific. I say all this to say, let's talk about energy transition. So I share with folks there are two aspects of decarbonization. The first aspect is on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions produced by the combustion of fossil fuels. And then the second aspect is around using the renewables and those technologies that have zero or no emissions associated with them. And that would include like winds, the solars, excuse me, biomass, geothermals, some of those technologies. But I like to ground folks on where these emissions are coming from. So you may have heard of these various scopes of emissions, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. This is where the emission sources come from, right? So scope 1s are those direct emissions. They come specifically from direct operations. It could be your stack, it could be from venting, fugitive emissions from anything that a company owns. It could be company vehicles, it could be your office emissions, it could be transportation. That is scope 1, direct emissions. There's a scope 2, which is, we call it indirect emissions. These are things that a company purchases. That could be around electricity, steam, heating, cooling, anything for their own use, a company's use. And in the third bucket, I call it, are another set of indirect emissions, but they're third parties. So it could be transportation and supply from a third party company. It could be your supply chain emissions. How do you get things to your organization? It could be transportation from a third party. It typically involves third party. Or it could be emissions from a contracted exploration and well maintenance. Or it could be from a non-operated asset. That is the scope of emissions. So what we look at, or what we should look at from a collaborative approach from a decarbonization standpoint, is how can you take all of these emissions and reduce them to none? Think about that. I want to talk about commitments that are being made, because I asked the question, how do you take all of these and reduce them to none? Consider, throughout the world, companies, organizations are opting into pledges, voluntary commitments. Not the regulatory, the ones that tell you you must and shall do it, but there are some voluntary commitments that are out there. I'd like to share at least 4 or 5 with you. There's one voluntary commitment to reduce global methane emissions by at least 30% from your 2020 baseline level by 2030. So 2030 is coming up very quickly. There are others in 2030, one around ending routine flaring. That's at a plant. So when you see those flares flaming up, how do you end the routine flaring? Not the safety flaring, but the routine flaring. The other one around 2030 is around the near zero upstream methane emissions, getting at near zero by 2030. And finally, there's one around net zero by 2050 or sooner, very similar to the Paris Agreement. But there is a new effort that just came out in December at COP28. It is the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, OGDC, which you see collectively in the middle of 3 of them. So OGDC is a commitment. It was committed by 50 companies have opted into it, signed this commitment to do 3 things, focus on 3 things: ending the routine flaring by 2030, the near zero upstream methane emissions by 2030, and the net zero by 2050 or sooner. How are we going to do this? We develop industry best practices to help companies get along that don't know how to start. We collaborate. Collaboration is king in this, and it is very key. You have to collaborate with others, getting lessons learned from others to get along on this journey very quickly. 2030 is coming quick. And how do you engage with your stakeholders and other authorities, meaning working to get policies, good sound policies made in this area to help move this energy transition along? There are barriers to the things that we do. One is around reporting mechanism. How do you standardize to be consistent? Instead of having one rule for this group, one rule for this group, it doesn't get done quickly if there's no standardization or consistency. Deployable business models. How do you make a business model that works repeatedly over and over again so that you can move it quicker and then it reduces the risk associated with any errors or upsets or delays? And then finally, how do you develop the regulatory framework? The regulatory framework will help in project design and operations. Good sound regulations would be key. I will talk just briefly around CCS, carbon capture and storage technologies. We collaborate amongst industry to ensure the inclusion of this technology solution. And that includes under CCS, the abatement of anthropogenic emissions from your heavier industries, which would be steel and cement. It could be around bioenergy CCS, which we call BECCS acronyms, and that's from the sustainable forest feedstock. And then there's the other one I'll talk a bit about is taking the ambient air, and it's called direct air capture. How do you capture the air and reduce the amount of carbon in that air? We have publications around some of these technologies from a CCS standpoint on how companies can do that and implement them very quickly. There are a couple of technologies out there, proven technologies out there to address the fugitive methane emissions that come from operations. They have solar camera airplanes, so airplanes that have cameras on them to detect and quantify emissions. You have helicopter imaging as well. You have satellite. There have been some new satellite programs that have come out here recently that were announced even during CERA Week last week in Houston. So they can capture emissions on a continual basis. You have some ground sensors. We use ground sensors. Truck-mounted sensors. They're on trucks as they drive by. It collects emissions and notifies companies. We have drones, and we also have gas cameras. A lot of this data is put into, most of this data is put into a database system, and then you select and optimize based on the data that you receive to find out what the deployable technologies would be for a particular operation. Again, all these finding and fixing things, we call it a finding and fix program, leak detection and repair programs. Good concept for reducing methane emissions. With that, I've said a lot. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, but I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Faye. All right, so now we're going to move to Matt. Before we do, I'll just remind everyone you can go ahead and submit questions on Slido, and I will be looking at them up here, trying to be diligent in doing that. So think about your questions as we go forward. Matt McDaniel is the engineering project manager of Carbon Direct. He's a mechanical engineer, so that makes me like him a lot just right away from that. It's no offense to chemical engineers. Has a background in business and coupled with extensive capital project experience, so this allows them to communicate how difficult it might be to think about carbon mitigation, carbon removal, and translating these ideas and these ambitious targets to actual projects on the ground. So Matt is our man to know how to actually build stuff on the ground and get it done. So that's what he's going to tell us about now and what Carbon Direct does. Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Kerry. I appreciate that. I will try to keep it short because I know we really want to get to y'all's questions. So as Kerry said, my name is Matt McDaniel. I have a big background in helping people move from ideation and thought process and trying to do business development through piloting, commercialization, scale up, startup operations, and in some cases decommissioning of very large facilities. So I've spent well over a decade helping people go from concepts in a lab to large-scale plants with steel in the ground that are running commercial operations. And at Carbon Direct, our focus is on combining technology with expert guidance in climate science to help our clients provide high-quality carbon management solutions. So what that means is we start with, we follow the Oxford Principles basis, so we help our clients start by measuring and prioritizing their reductions, but then where my group is heavily invested, we are focused on providing high-quality removals and what it takes to help scale those in the market today, because as Faye mentioned, some of those technologies are a little bit nascent, so we're helping try to get some of those off the ground to generate some of these high-quality removals. We are trusted at Carbon Direct by some of the world's most climate-forward companies. So we've worked with an extensive amount of global firms that choose us because we are known for our expertise. We approach things with a science-first mindset. We focus on the science behind what's being offered before we will look to engage and delve into the quality aspects of any given credit. Our team is quite extensive, so the smattering that I have up here is actually just kind of a agglomeration of most of our folks that work with industrial decarbonization, but we work across nature-based solutions, we work across engineered solutions, hybrid solutions. We have an entire policy team that's focused on engaging with clients on their policies and understanding how those can impact between the EU, the US, wherever their basis may be. And one of the main things that we're seeing right now, one of the biggest issues we're seeing in decarbonization is as people look to scale these projects, as people look to bring some of these new technologies online, there's just a general lack of project management excellence in the carbon removal space. What I mean by that is we are trying to help people focus more on quality project management and execution applications. So things in the oil and gas industry that most would refer to front-end loading, they refer to stage gate. Some of the projects that we're seeing, the innovative technologies that we're seeing in many of these areas and approaches, they are kind of coming in from a small entrepreneurial startup type basis, which tends to take the mindset of, well, we'll hire an engineering firm to help us scale that. That's not going to be an issue. We'll get the permits. That's not going to be an issue. And it's really helping these project developers understand there's technical impacts, there's economical impacts, there's environmental impacts, commercial, operational, and political, that all need to come together and work as a holistic unit in order to drive success on any given project. Anyone that's done large, complex industrial facilities will know that it's not as easy as we're just going to hire somebody and we'll get some contracts in line for offtake. So we're focused on helping understand the path to quality, so that's inclusive of siting, it's inclusive of environmental justice, the harms and benefits to the community for many of these projects, and also helping focus on quality and not sacrificing for speed. So we're seeing a drive right now, as the other speakers mentioned, there are several commitments people are trying to force towards goals, which are admirable and they're needed, but we also need to keep in mind that there's a quality aspect behind each of these projects. So the projects need to be able to work at scale when they get there. So we can't sacrifice quality for speed, and understanding shaping and scoping is important. So where are you going to play? How are you going to win? Doing the right projects and doing the right projects right. So helping organizations understand that, especially some of these nascent project developers as they're looking to kind of ramp their solutions. So helping them understand a full value chain, who are your key stakeholders in the community, economically, that you have to engage with, what's the addressable market size that you're going to go to, what's the key behaviors and policies that you're trying to drive. You can't just go to Amazon and order a pressure vessel, right? I mean, you might be able to, but I'm not going to stand next to it when you fire the lineup. So how do we help people understand that that is an integrated commercial process that takes a long time to actually develop and get an asset that you can put into a functioning plant? So I know Silicon Valley's kind of more heavy on the, like, let's move fast and break things approach. That can work for software. You really don't want to do that with a multi-million-dollar CapEx plant. So I tend to favor more of the Wyatt Earp approach, which is fast is fine, but your accuracy is going to be final. So we have to learn to be slow in a hurry. We have to learn to focus on driving quality to generate high-quality removals in the space and help our clients understand that path forward. So Carrie, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Matt. So I'm just coming over here to switch back the slides. So Matthieu, these questions are all for you as well, and please submit your questions on Slido. So Matthieu, we're going to come to you third. We're going to go to the two here in the room on this first question first. Your organizations kind of have a different set of clients, perhaps, and what the clients are asking for. So what can you tell me about sort of your clients, what they're asking you to do, and how you kind of give them what your clients want? Maybe we'll start with you, Faye.
Yeah, so that's a good question. What are clients asking us to do? It's something around coming up with the fix. How do you sit with a group of individuals, companies, and come up with a solution to real life problems. It's almost like a think tank, right? So they're asking us to come up with items around energy transition, methane detection, reducing flaring, newer technologies, renewable technologies around carbon capture and storage. That has been the ask, and what we do is we come up with publications, deep technical publications, so we get a group of technical experts in the fields, and they're not coming from IOGP specifically, they're coming from our members, the ones that are out there fixing the problem in real time in their respective organizations. We share learnings. It's important to do that so that we can come up with a systematic approach to solve these problems and solutions to get us to lower emissions, net zero by 2050 or sooner, and also to meet some of the commitments that are out there, or all of the commitments, not some, all the commitments regarding methane and flaring.
Right.
Yeah?
Great. Matt?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question as well. One of the main focuses from our clients that we're seeing is, I know I've said the word before, but I'm going to beat it to death, but it really is the main driver, is quality. So how do you get high quality credits in a market that you can pull up the news and really find any examples recently of people that generated what turned out to be low quality credits? So how do we help the market understand quality? How do we help them understand prioritization of the quality credits? And how do we help them engage in those principles and practices to help drive that? Is one of the main focuses that we're seeing from our clients and one of the asks from industry.
Right, so part of your value add is that you're claiming, I give you some good quality data and verification on this project you're going to engage with, and this is kind of one of the things your clients asked for, huh?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So Matthieu, what do people ask of the SHIFT project, and what do you give them? Can you give us an example of a client and something you do for them?
Well, we don't have actually clients, as we are a not-for-profit organization. So our first and only client is the general interest of our purpose, that is to launch coherent conversations regarding energy transition, firstly in France, then in the European Union. But as I'm listening to you, I would like to do my job and try and influence, shift maybe the conversation toward a general interest topic. I find it very, very significant, very telling that you are talking a lot about carbon capture, and I would be interested to have your both Matt and Dr. Faye Gerard, tell us roughly what share of the roughly 5 billion tons of CO2 that the US emits every year that could be captured actually within one generation with your carbon capture techniques, and also how many terawatt per hour that would involve of decarbonized electricity in order to pump the carbon out of the atmosphere. I would be very interested to see if you had that back of the envelope
Right.
very significant, the limits of techniques.
So let me try to put, so these, I thank Emmanuel Henry for organizing these panels. You just kind of have this French theme. The one previously had the nuclear, and you kind of got from the previous panel listening that, France, in some sense, as a country, has its own policy, and they're thinking about their constraints, which sound different than the United States, which, of course, sound different than the clients of the international oil and gas producers. So maybe just to his question, I mean, how much do we think about whether something, carbon capture or direct air capture, is sort of a solution we really have to use, and how do your clients or you think about, kind of at what scale we can think to use that, since there's a lot of experiments. We know we can sort of fundamentally do it on an engineering basis, but we haven't really done it on a large scale. I can't order the carbon capture from Amazon, I guess, as Matt said, so I don't.
Yeah, so I'll give you my thoughts. So we at IOGP put together publications. We are not the operators. We have 90 operators in our portfolio members, we'll call it. So you asked the question, how much on the back of an envelope could be captured from CCS technologies. That is a technology, not the only technology. Let me just share that. What one must think about, because it's not moving, you don't see a lot of CCS opportunities going up now. There's also a thing about, I know you can't mail order it from Amazon, but there's also something called the regulation. So the regulations are not in place right this 1 second to move it as quick as we want it to move. There are permits required to do these type of technologies. For instance, Class 6 permits are required to do CCS. There's regulations out there now being developed. I think the technologies some technologies are available, but you just can't build something right this 1 second without the proper regulation in place. Otherwise, kind of gets shut down. So to answer your question, Matthew, there and others, it has to be at pace. I think you said something that was interesting. I think one of the quotes you said is slow but in a hurry. I like the slow but in a hurry. I wrote it down. But we need to make it in a hurry. Regulations have to be there in place to do that first and foremost.
And Matthieu, I think you've actually got an awesome idea for a paper, so we should talk after this.
I agree.
But one of the things that like I was saying, that we drive towards is following the Oxford principles. So the answer to the question is really hard to come by because it's very nuanced. Like you were saying, Faye, it depends on the technologies, and if you're taking just a purely technology focus, at Carbon Direct, our focus is we need all the removals we can get. So that includes nature-based solutions, that includes prioritizing reductions, which is all going to have an impact on whatever calculation you're going to try to run from that analysis. So I'm in the boat of we want to focus on prioritizing, helping our clients prioritize reductions, but then also when we talk about these different carbon capture solutions, we also have to recognize there are nature-based solutions. That's a very large portfolio. So to focus in on one specific technology is very hard to give any type of deep analysis on that. So I'm very much in the boat of we need all the removals that we can get because we've got a crisis on our hands, and that's the only way that we're actually going to be able to deliver.
And just to pick up on one thing that you said, Matt said about prioritizing emissions. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we also provide at IOGP is even to prioritize them, you have to know where they're coming from. So you have to have a baseline. Be able to put a database together of all emissions that are out there from organizations. And it sounds easy to do, but it's almost an inventory of your emissions in order to prioritize which ones are the largest ones and how I'm going to resolve or reduce it to zero or near zero. So that's the start of it. That's just like the foundation to get them into emissions into an inventory bank, I'll call it.
All right, so I'll go to a question from online here. It's Slido. So Matthieu and France, we'll come to you after the people in the room here, but the question is in the context of the United States rules and the Biden administration as a target for 2035 for a net zero electricity grid, so not the whole energy system, but here we're just talking about electricity. We already breached carbon capture as a potential solution, or part of that, but how are you thinking about this for the electric grid? I don't know if it's more for Matt than Faye, or how are your clients thinking? Is this where most of the work is, or clients are asking you about, is in the electric grid, and what kind of progress do you think we're making in terms of the technologies available to get to net zero 2035, or is that just ambitious and we've got to try and then get as close as we can?
I mean, it's definitely an ambitious goal, but we need a lot more zero carbon energy. We need a lot more. I don't know if anybody in here has read the paper, The Green's Dilemma. It's a couple years old now, I think, but it talks about in there how fast we have to scale the electric grid, and it's something like building somewhere around 8,000 more new miles of power lines, and that's just power lines. And I think the closest we've gotten to that is about half of that in 1 year. So the scale of what we're talking about doing with decarbonizing the grid is absolutely massive. And where we're trying to help our clients prioritize their focus is on what are the different technologies in that space, and what's the quality of each of those technologies, and how does it help to contribute to quality reductions, but then also quality removals. So we definitely get a lot of questions around zero carbon electricity. It is definitely one of the things that we track as an advisory team. But we are committed to helping our clients focus on what's the best way to actually do that transition and what's the best way to actually make the progress in that area.
All right, so Matthieu, at the SHIFT project, I'm going to add something. So the question maybe, do you know France's goals for decarbonizing electricity? It's obviously a long way there with nuclear power already. But in terms of what Matt here in the room said, which is we have to sort of maybe build things faster than we haven't done, one of the other questions from the audience is, do we need some kind of paradigm shift in changing about how we approach this? So the SHIFT project has the word shift in it. Is that, do you think we need a paradigm shift in how we organize the economy to achieve decarbonization and the electricity question as well? So go ahead, Matthieu.
Yes, obviously we need a shift of paradigm. I believe I underlined that in my introduction speech. In a very practical sense, in France we have roughly 80% of our electricity mix that is decarbonized, but it's only, as you know, a fifth. The electricity is like in any given developed country is only a fifth of the total energy that we consume, and most of the rest is fossil fuels. So when you try and project your energy system down the road with in like 10, 20, 30 years, what you see is that there is no way that you're gonna replace all the oil and natural gas that you consume at the same level of consumption. In fact, we never chose fossil fuels. Fossil fuels imposed themselves on us because they accumulate incredibly different and incomparable qualities, technical qualities, natural qualities, so to speak. So therefore, when you see roughly in France, we consume 2 billion terawatt hour per year, we would have to go down to roughly 700 or 600 terawatt hour of electricity, plus what you could get from biogas, bioliquids. When you add up and everything you could get from those alternative sources, you still have, even if you're very optimistic, to slash down half of the electricity, half of the energy that you consume. You can do that, you can do a fair share of the way with efficiency, because electricity in most cases is way more efficient than thermic engines. But even if you calculate that, you still have to go down the way of frugality, or what is more and more referred to in Europe as sufficiency, what we would call in France structural sobriety or sufficiency. And that involves deforming, transforming the way the vital organs of our society, industry, agriculture, social, health systems are shaped in order for them to use way less and less energy and materials, because there is no way that you can compete with alternative to oil and gas, even whether if you're very pro-renewables or very pro-nuclear energy or very pro whatever you name it, there is no way that you can compete at the same level of consumption,
So SHIFT projects, or Matthieu's expressing here the appreciation for the technical capabilities of hydrocarbons effectively, and how difficult that is to get off, and how part of their paradigm shift, or the SHIFT project, is getting people to think about sobriety. I think consuming less. I don't know if this conversation comes up with any of your clients, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe talk about that paradigm shift. Let me piggyback on that. So I definitely appreciate a paradigm shift. There is a shift that it would be appreciated. I will share with a shift, they need to be well thought out, well planned, and done 100% safely. I don't hear a lot about safety in the conversations, but with new things, when you start something new, it's just important that we take into account the people that are doing it to keep them safe, to make sure there are no accidents, incidents that are irreversible. So I just want to throw that out in the room.
And the other thing I'll throw out on the topic is the idea of permitting, which actually ties in, Faye, with what you're talking about, is permits are in place to ensure safety, and they're in place to help us ensure that we don't have detrimental effects to the environment. But when we talk about expanding the grid, the permitting process is one of the key bottlenecks as well. So that's an area that we do need. We need reform, but we need reform that's thought through and well thought out so that we don't have any safety impacts, we don't have any adverse environmental impacts. But we've got a backlog of, I think the average backlog for a power plant to connect to the grid is somewhere around 3 years. When we talk about CCS, the Class 6 wells that need to be drilled for those, it's like an 18 to 20 month permitting process just to get your permit for the well. So those are factors that come in when we talk about the timelines of these projects and helping these project developers and people interested in these technologies really move forward. Is the permitting process as a whole kind of needs to be not revamped, but kind of reapproached and considered to figure out how we can kind of get some better synergies there and get some better efficiencies to help move that part of the piece faster.
Right, so similar topic came up on nuclear panel. Texas is going to, maybe no news flash there, try to get the federal government to speed up permitting for nuclear, but we're saying we need it here for carbon removal or decarbonization technologies. And so maybe there's I don't know, maybe there's a paradigm shift in the way that we view government, that we need more government workers to facilitate this process and technically skilled as well. So with that said, I think we're roughly at time here to move to the next panel. So again, we think our remote guest here from France, again, Matthieu Auzanneau of the Shift Project, Matt McDaniel of Carbon Direct, and Dr. Faye Girard here of International Oil and Gas Producers. Thank you very much for having this conversation here at UT Energy Week with us.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.